Robert C. Weaver was an economist, academic, and political administrator. He served as the first United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development from 1966 to 1968. In the new agency established in 1965 under President Johnson, Weaver was the first African American to be appointed to a U.S. cabinet level position. When the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development was formed, the urban crisis seemed to be at its height. President Johnson's view of the proposed department suggested that it would become the focal point of thought, innovation, and imagination about the problems of our cities. Robert Weaver's hopes for HUD are coordination of federal housing, the public housing, the urban renewal, the community facilities, and the office of the administrator to structure the new department. He also sought significant expansion of existing programs to demonstrate how quality of life in low-income neighborhoods could be raised by integrating physical and social planning and rehabilitation activities. Enactment of an effective fair housing law and enactment of a comprehensive housing and urban development act that would increase production of housing for all income groups and provide access to the housing through adequate mortgage credit. Another high-priority goal was development of a policy for optioning or buying land for future urban development. First major legislation proposed for HUD was the Demonstration Cities and Metropolitan Development Act of 1966, also known as Model Cities. It demonstrated substantial achievements, some of which have had lasting effects. It opened numerous job opportunities for the poor and minorities, in which process it accelerated upward job mobility. Weaver believed that the principal objective of model cities is to provide decent community services and rehabilitate the neighborhood. Nixon and Ford administrations described the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968 as one of the two basic elements in watershed year for national housing policy. Civil Rights Act of 1968 was the second major housing policy. It extended the prohibition of racial discrimination in housing. Its most notable characteristics, aside from its wide diversity, were its unprecedented commitment to housing for the disadvantaged and the novel participation of the politically influential home builders. The Nixon and Ford years, 1969 to 1976. HUD built on the 1968 Housing and Urban Development Act, extending the New Communities Program. HUD's initial enforcement of the 1968 Civil Rights Act's program of affirmative action is to eliminate racial discrimination in housing. HUD added the requirement that localities provide subsidized housing, an effort to disperse racial minorities geographically throughout metropolitan areas. It caused an immediate backlash in Congress, leading the White House to oppose it. In early 1973, HUD abruptly reversed its policies and goals, placing a moratorium on construction of subsidized housing. HUD under Nixon revealed, however, that program operation was the basic cause of problems in the housing programs. Cutbacks in federal spending and the Nixon administration's fight monetary policy had constrained mortgage credit. During the Carter administration, HUD attempted a more effective in dispersing racial and economic groups throughout the metropolitan areas. Urban Development Action Grants Program to leverage private investments in enterprises that provide central city jobs. UDAG funds were intended to promote economic development of distressed areas like model cities. But the program did not attempt to coordinate grant-funded projects with other housing and community development activities. The Reagan administration reversed most of the Carter deviations from the policies of the Nixon and Ford years. Government priorities were shifting away from the poor at the same time that the building industry. In fiscal 1977, the federal government brought 388,000 housing units into the assistance programs. 52% of those either were newly built or had undergone substantial rehabilitation. By fiscal 1982, that number was down to 52,000, and only 12% were newly built or had undergone substantial rehabilitation. In 1986, a budget was proposed by demonstrating to further the administration's lack of commitment to urban development and housing. The budget proposal would provide no funds in job training, food stamps, aid to families, and Medicare. Lessons from the first 20 years of HUD. First, when goals are not stated clearly, it is often because complex problems or diverse concerns are involved. Second, assumptions that shape goals and mold programs can adversely affect those programs if they are erroneous or unrealistic. Third, is the importance of including people with expertise and experience in the area in groups appointed to design programs and policies. Fourth, is the value of a strong commitment by HUD to the objectives set forth in the program. What has caused HUD, despite its enormously important province, to be relegated to the backwaters of the power hierarchy? First and foremost is the issue of race. Second, this may be of relatively small importance in departments whose functions are well defined. It is of overwhelming importance, however, when a department's domain must be marked out. Third, and most important from a power-based point of view, is the necessity for the department to become more central to all of housing. Putting together a meaningful, powerful constituency will require a change of course that undoubtedly will outrage many of HUD's traditional clients.